Yo! All right, I got another really exciting thing that just came into the studio that I'm psyched to tell you about today. This box has just come in from Empirical Labs Incorporated ELI. Guess what? My full name is Elijah. I go by Lij, but I used to go by Eli too. So there you go. I guess that's kind of close to home. All right, so this box should contain something that is really long overdue for this studio. Like really long overdue. I've been making records since I got out of school in the 90s. I mean, I was doing it before that on 4-tracks and with my band and stuff like that. But professionally in a studio, about 95 is when I finished school and got started in my first studio, a place called Alex the Great over in Berry Hill, with a couple of people, Brad Jones and Robin Eaton, both of whom have been guests on the show, who are great, you know, really, really fun mentors, fun people to work with, fun people to make records with. And over at Alex the Great, you know, when I first started out there, we were working on ADATs, and we had, we had a Mackie 32-channel board, 8-channel board, which was pretty great. I got to be honest. It was a lot of fun working on a console. I know that, you know, of course, at the time, it was like, how do we get this thing to sound better? Or they, you know, that's what I was thinking, just like we always think. I'm sure you're thinking that now as you make records. It's like, I like what I'm doing, but how do I get it to sound better? But we also had, oh, this is great. We also had a tape machine. So we had a 2-inch JH16 tape machine, just like I used to have here in the studio. And we called it Fatty. And we'd record things over to Fatty and then transfer it into the ADATs and stuff. It all sounded great. We had a handful of outboard mic pre's, like some Neve mic pre's. We had, oh my gosh, what were some of the other ones? It's been so long since I even said the names. I can picture it. ART as well, you know, tube pre's and stuff like that. And then we had some outboard compressors. And right around the mid-90s, after I had started there, one day those guys brought in a compressor that I'd never seen before. And it was this new thing that was kind of trending at the time that was pretty cool. Now we had an old Neve 2254 in there. We had, I think a 10, gosh, I don't remember what the mic pre was. I guess it was we didn't have a 1073. Maybe later we did. But we had like an 1178 Uri style compressor. It's like the 1176, the stereo version. But along came this new compressor. Oh, and also we used the Alesis 3630s. So those things were great because they were cheap and affordable, and you know, you had all these adjustable options with the knobs. By the way, you like my serrated bread knife for opening. This is the official unboxing knife here at the Toy Box Studio. But along came this compressor one day, and it came from a new company called Empirical Labs. And the designer, who I actually didn't even know who it was for a really long time until more recently, is a guy named Dave Durr, who was making records, mixing records, and also building gear. And he came up with this brilliant design idea for a compressor that was going to give you all kinds of features of all these other different kinds of compressors and like massive control, but also like really high quality sound at the same time. And that compressor was the Distressor. So back in the 90s is when I was first introduced to the Distressor, and it became a staple to use on every single record. You know, we would mix through it, sure, but we'd always record stuff through it. And there's a particular song on a record that I did with Roscoe Gordon, who was the first guy to record for Sun Records and Sam Phillips in Memphis. And I had the great honor of doing his posthumous last record of his career, called No Dark in America. That's the name of the album. But there was one song in there called Rio, or A Night in Rio. And I carefully like overdubbed all this crazy percussion stuff, trying to recreate the sound of Carnival down in Rio. And every single overdub with Mickey Grimm, who was the drummer and percussionist, we were using like the Coles 4038 and bringing that through the mic pre and through the Distressor. So we got these crazy wild sounds. I'll try and drop a link in this video to that song so you can go listen to that too if you want. But I was blown away with how amazing the Distressor sounded and what was possible when you recorded through this thing. You know, you could like sculpt incredible sounds, and you could take sounds that sounded kind of boring in the studio and plain, and make them sound incredibly exciting and like they were exploding out of your speakers in a really cool way. And it didn't matter whether you were recording drums, percussions, overdubs, bass, guitar, vocals, or whatever. The Distressor became the go-to for making a great sound in the studio. So fast forward to now, and once I started my home studio, I'd used a Distressor in a lot of different pro studios. There was a band called The Living Things that I was traveling and recording and producing with for, you know, the first decade of my career, and those guys had a couple of Distressors, and we used them all the time, and they just became part of our sound. But once I started my home studio, I just, for one reason or another, I just didn't start with one. I just didn't have one. And I thought for a long time, like, I really need to get a Distressor in the studio. So I finally am now doing that. And this is another one. I've got two of these guys in here. And look at this. Because I'm working with these guys through the podcast, I got a little personal letter here from Dave. I think it may just be an invoice. That's great. Dave put together some special ones out of stock because these things are so they're so popular that it's hard for those guys to even find a couple to send over to me. Of course, if you go to the store, you can order one off of any dealer and get it directly. But in this case, these have been very, very popular. Now, Dave was telling me, I think that the Distressor at this point has sold something like, historically, like closing in on 50,000 units. Can you imagine that? 50,000 really nice compressors that have been in studios all around the world for decades now. I guess it's almost 30 years or something like that since this first came out. Don't quote me on that. I think that's close though. But anyway, let me show you what the Distressor looks like here on the face. You probably might be familiar with it, and maybe you're just enjoying seeing me unbox a new one. But this particular one is the EL8-X, and that means it has some special features on it. And first of all, this thing is heavy. There's so much, whoops, you're not gonna see my face. This thing, there's so much in this. This is not a cheap piece of gear. This is like some serious shit for your studio. So it's pretty amazing to just hold it in my hands. The front face of the Distressor has a number of different features on it. Let me start on the left and then I'll go over to the right. The first button is your bypass button. So you can just simply engage it or disengage it. So you can compare what your original sound is and what you're doing with the Distressor, because this thing does such crazy changes to sounds in a good way that you find it's really helpful to just keep checking yourself against home base that way. Then you got the ratio knob here, and it flips you through all these different ratios. So Distressor has always been famous for having some like crazy high ratios too. So you got 1:1, which gives you something called the British mod, which I'll look at here in a minute. And I don't even know if I should go into explaining it because it's going to be kind of new for me and I'm going to have to learn how it works myself. But it'll let you access the British mod. Then you got 2:1, 3:1, 4:1, 6:1, and I can't remember where it defaults to when you start it up. Maybe it probably starts up with the last setting you had. I know the plugin, I think, defaults to 6:1, which I find a really useful one. 4:1 would be a ratio that I might typically start out on an 1176 for guitars and vocals and stuff like that. But you go higher and you get more control over your compression. 10:1, 20:1, and then nuke. And that was the one that was always really fun. So nuking drum mics is one of the most fun things you can do in the studio when you're recording. Just remember that when you're nuking a mic in your studio in the recording process, it's really hot with gain. So do be cautious if you happen to turn up your speakers, or if somebody opens the door to the control room and the mic's like just outside the door and your speakers are cranked. you got to watch out for feedback when you do stuff like that. Also, if you do like crazy gains and you're doing a vocal overdub, for example, that microphone on the vocalist is going to like feedback right into the headphones. So you end up like finding a sweet spot balance for those things while you're recording it. If you can avoid the feedback possibility during a recording, then you can just go crazy with these settings and it sounds awesome. And then of course, if you're mixing, you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. You just, you know, you can compress it like crazy at the mix stage. But anyway, so those are the different ratios on this. And then let me get my glasses back on. Okay, then you come over here and you've got a couple of indicators right above the ratio knob. Well, first of all, you've got this, you can see 26 on this end, 1 on this end. And what this is this is the compression LED display. And so if there's no compression, you'll see basically no lights over there. I believe that's right. Maybe you'll see the 1 light up or something. And then as you add compression, you see the lights light up. And so like if 4 lights light up, that means it's 4, what does that mean? Does that mean it's 4 decibels of compression? But that means it's compressing to that much. You know, that might be like a little bit of compression. And what's cool about this guy is when you put it into nuke mode and you just do room mics or drum mics or something like that, you can go crazy. So you can get what you can be redlining with the compression. And this redline does not mean that the sound is overloading and you're redlining. It means you're doing an insane amount of compression, which can be a really, really cool sound. Now there is a redline here that's just called redline. And that means if this hits, then I believe that means your input is too hot or your output is too hot. And so you are like distorting the unit. And again, you can use your ears and decide if you like that sound or not, but typically you might avoid that redline light here. Below that, well, you got a nice little waveform thing here, so that's cool. I guess that waveform shows it's a little bit squared off, which I think is THD. 1% THD is third harmonic distortion. I think that's what that is, right? THD. So that means when this lights up, you're getting some distortion that is potentially pleasant, as this has a sort of a built-in saturation circuit. And you see over here, these guys let you access that too, so I'll show you that as well. And then when you hit this red line, I think that means it's either over or that means you're just getting a ton of distortion. And again, it might be a good thing. You just got to use your ears and decide. Next up, you got the detector button, and that is, you know, what is this thing listening to decide when to compress. So when this guy is not enabled, then it's probably taking, I can't remember if it's, I don't know if it matters if it's feedback or feed forward or whatever, but it's essentially taking your input signal, I think, and it's sending that to the side chain. So it's detecting that and it's setting the threshold against that input so that it compresses things, comes out the output. Sometimes, actually I don't want to say that because I don't want to be wrong on that, on the way a compressor technically works inside. But essentially, you're just measuring the signal that's coming into this guy. If you want to do a side chain compression, I think you would hit the link button. Let me see. Let me see what it says on this guy. If you wanted to patch something into the stereo in, maybe you can do side chain through the stereo. You know what? I don't know that I've done side chain on a distressor yet. So there's another fun thing for me to do. But you can also put 2 of these units together, which I've got another one in that box back there, right there, Rockstars, believe it or not. And then you just patch the output of the other one into the input of this, I think, and the output of this one into the input of the other one. And yeah, it says connect both jacks, outs to ins. And then what that does is that stereo links the 2 units so that they operate, you know, the left channel is affecting the right compression, the right channel is affecting the left compression. If you turn off that linking, then it's like split compression, which sometimes is the sound you want. Sometimes it's better to just have the left channel only compress the left side and the right channel only compress the right side, but not compress each other. In a stereo mix, one of the reasons why you would want them to affect each other is because anything that's in the middle of your mix, if one side compresses, it's turning down this speaker, so it's going to make that center image sound louder out of the right speaker, so it's going to make your center image move if you don't have linked stereo. But there's a lot of situations like a piano, for example, where you don't exactly have a center image. You've got low notes and you've got high notes. And in those situations, you might want them to separately compress from each other. Again, use your ears and decide which one you like when you're doing it. But here's how you would do that in reality. So you would have those jacks linked on the back, and then you're going to click this detector and you click it till it selects link, and that will link the two units. Now you're in stereo compression. If you turn, hit it, what happens is when you hit this, it kind of cycles through all these options. So you might have to hit it like 3 or 4 times to go back to 0, but you can unlink the units that way. Then you have a high pass filter. This is going to filter out all the lows. So you can click this until the green light comes on, and it's going to take the lows out of your detector circuit, which means that, if you're mixing something like a kick drum, or you're putting this across the whole stereo mix, and maybe you're mixing dance music and you're like, I don't want there's so much low frequency in this sound, I don't want that to cause the rest of it to compress. I want to kind of let that through, and then let all the, control all the mid-range and the highs and stuff like that instead. You can do that high pass filter on the detection circuit, and it's going to let you compress, but let the low stuff through. So then there's another one here in the middle. This one is really cool too. Now see that little mountain, that little mountain peak there? That is a mid to high. I don't remember what the actual frequency is. I'll have to look that up. But maybe I can find it while I'm talking. But that guy boosts the mids in the side chain. So when it's detecting the signal to decide if it should compress it, it's getting an exaggerated mid-range, or to upper frequencies. Let me see here. So there's high pass mode, detector modes, band emphasis. There you go. Emphasis on 6K. So yeah, it's not even mids, it's upper mids, way upper mids, getting into the high frequencies. And what that does is that makes the unit overreact to harsh mids. So I guess it is mids. Depends on your definition of mids, whatever. So 6K is like up in that sibilance frequency too. It's kind of where the S's live. And so by turning on that mid-band emphasis, it's like converting this thing to more of a de-esser. So if you have a vocalist who's like got a really harsh edge to something, or you got a guitar, probably even drums, if there's a harshness to the sound, you can put on that detector, and it's going to do more compressing around those harsh frequencies. So that's a very, very cool feature, right? All right, so moving on here, we've got audio. This button right here will cycle through the high pass, distressor 2, and or distortion 2 and distortion 3. So if you do the audio high pass, it's going to actually cut out the lows in your signal. So maybe you want to high pass your vocals or something like that and get some of the lows out. How cool is that you get that high pass feature at the compressor, right? Usually that comes to us through the mic pre, and we don't have, once we hit the compressor, we're kind of like, well, if you didn't take the lows out, tough luck, dude. So in this case, you actually have a little more control at the compression stage, which is very cool. And then you've got the distortion 2 and the distortion 3, and we'll see what it says here, but those should be, let me see, here we go. So distortion modes, normal clean means no introduced distortion. The THD, the third harmonic distortion, is hovering between 0.25 and 3.3%. So a little bit of saturation, tiny bit, but that's essentially clean mode. And why is there any distortion at all in clean mode? Because we like the sound of things. That's what makes, some of the old gear, tape, things like that really appealing to our ear. The THD of a mixing console, for example, when we're not even overdriving it, we're hearing a little bit of that harmonic, which just makes sounds sound cool, brings out the highs and the details. Then distortion 2 is THD hovering between 0.05 and 3%, so a little more. It emphasizes the second harmonic, which I believe is closer to a tube distortion. Somebody drop a comment in and correct me if I'm wrong. And then distortion 3 is THD hovering between 0.1% and 20%. And third harmonic distortion increase, which I believe is a little bit more like, I don't know if that's like tape. I think tape might have some of that in it, but it's probably more like a transistor or a circuit distortion. Again, correct me if I'm wrong on this. Don't take me to a science class on that. But just know that distortion 2 and then distortion 3 to our ears is going to sound from more gentle to more extreme. That's a good way to say it. And they both sound great. So then let me keep moving forward here through these guys. And you've got next up, when we move away from audio, we've got the input. And the way this works on a distressor is a little bit like an 1176 or something, where you have a fixed threshold and you're pushing the input into that threshold. So you're gaining the sound up in for more compression. So if you want to, for example, get compression but control your output, then you're going to be doing a combination. You're going to be adjusting the output by hand a little bit and adjusting the input and doing, like, you know, a combined level adjust. But it's really fun because it lets you feel like you're sculpting the sound while you're recording it, which is great. Then the next knob here is attack. And as you can imagine, that is like, if you put it on 0 attack, it's, I believe that's the way it goes. I'll have to double check that. But the fastest attack is going to be very, very quick. So it's going to catch any peak. One of the things that's really great about this is it's so fast. So for example, a great instrument to record that is kind of crazy sounding is a glockenspiel. You know, when you do a glockenspiel, you're hitting that a mallet, usually a hard mallet on a hard metal tine. So it's a very, very quick spike of sound. And then it's got the sustain, but the spike is like way up here and the sustain is like way down here. And it can sound great to record it in just, you know, raw if you want, if that's the sound you want. But if you want to emphasize the sustain of an instrument like a glockenspiel, but really, you know, if you turned it way up so you'd hear the sustain, the spike would be like, it'd just like kill you, and it'd kill your mix and kill your speakers and kill your ear, kill your neighbors, all that. So having a compressor like the Distressor, where you can find the ratio and do a really fast attack and then a fast-ish release, lets you dial it in such a way that you're just controlling the spike of that sound, but not really compressing the sustain, or you're compressing the sustain in such a way that it's gently keeping the level of the sustain up. So you can convert a crazy sound like a glockenspiel into something that sounds like a long sustaining note played gently on a piano or something. You know, it's really amazing for stuff like that. Next knob on this, after attack, of course, is just what you would expect. It's the release. So you can tell it to let go of the compression very quickly or very slowly, right? And I don't remember which way is fast and slow, so I'll have to wait till we've got this plugged in here so I don't tell you which, you know, I don't remember if 0 is going to be fast and 10 is slow, or if 10 is fast and 0 is slow. But it's immediately evident when you plug it in. And then you've got your output level here, so you can adjust your output to your recording interface. So you can, you know, go crazy with sounds and levels, and no matter what you're recording into, you can get the level exactly the way you want it in your DAW or on your tape machine or wherever you're going. Next up, you've got these switches that are specific to the EL8-X. You've got the stereo image link. Oh, that's interesting. So what I was saying about detector link and stereo image link, I'll have to look into that a little bit more. Seems like you can link them here as well as there or something. So I'll have to double check on that. Maybe this gives you the, yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Sorry. I'll find out more. All right, let me look it up right here. There you go. And then you've got another switch next to that, which I'm about to show you, which is the British mode 1-to-1. But we will tell you what the stereo operation. So stereo operation requires only two things. The two cables going in the back, which are plugged into the stereo link inputs. And then the unit has a link function, and the stereo image link switch is on if it's provided on the EL8-X. It says it's usually best to match all front panel settings on the two left and right units. Okay, so when you are in stereo mode, I think you need to turn on this link button here and then flip on the stereo link switch, and I'll show you that again up close. So when you want to go stereo mode, I think you're going to have to turn on this detector link and flip on the stereo link there. Don't know exactly why you might have to do both, but sounds like maybe you do. And then you want to match the other settings on here so that both compressors do the same thing. unless you don't, unless you like some other different sound differently. But let me see here. I'll come back later and show some of these special tricks too. British mode. Let's find out about British mode. So the original concept of the British mode came from an unusual setting on the classic 1176 limiter. The unit was designed to have only 4 ratios, each ratio being engaged by selecting one of 4 buttons. That would be 4-to-1, 8-to-1, 10-to-1, 20-to-1. However, as early as 1980 or before, renegade recording engineers, always on the lookout for something a little more over the top, found that you could make all 4 buttons stay in if you press them all at the same time just right. What resulted was a very, very aggressive sound that had some elements of the unit's 20-to-1 ratio, but with an unusual knee and a new envelope shape. Somewhere along the line, someone called it a British mode. I've also heard it called 7-up, I think. And I've heard it just called all button mode. And the name has stuck. It's also called all buttons in and some other intuitive names. The Distressor has the advantage of being able to apply this aggressive nature not only to a new British ratio of 1-to-1, but also to all the ratios since a separate switch is installed, which can be enabled with any ratio. One should keep in mind, however, that an attack well below 3 or 4 is required to maintain the 1176 character. So that means this attack knob, you'd want to keep it below 3 or 4 in that lower range to have that quality to it. If you go above the attack of 3, you'll also incur a rise in some grunge, quote, distortion, and see the THD indicator light come on a lot more. So it's going to be a lot of fun to experiment with that British mode and see how it sounds. I'll do some more videos later where I show the British mode in action, try out some stuff. We'll try out the stereo stuff, and I'll get this plugged in and give you guys a chance to listen to it. I hope you go check this out. Empirical Labs, link is below in the video. If you enjoyed this and you want to see more videos where I dive into how this thing's working in the studio, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it. And if you're mixing and mixing is your focus and you're in the box, check out my free mixing class called Mix Master Bundle, where I show you how to take your songs and mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding much more like professional mixes using nothing but free and stock plugins in your DAW. I use Pro Tools, but this is going to work for you in anything. And it's free, so go check it out, and we'll see you guys in the next video. And make sure to go check out Empirical Labs. And if you're not ready for a hardware unit yet, go check out the plugins because they sound amazing. I'm a huge fan of the Arouser plugin. I use it all the time. Thanks for watching, Rockstars. We'll see you around the studio. Cheers.